Welcome everyone. Hope you're doing well. We're just going to give it a few minutes to let everyone log in, and then we'll get started just shortly. Okay, that brings us to just 3 minutes past the hour, so we'll get started. We may have a few people continue to join us, and I can see we have a few people also watching through our Facebook group, so welcome to everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, all the Young Baden-Powell Fellows from around the world. And for those watching after the fact through our recording, my name is Alex Kilby. I'm a Young Baden-Powell Fellow from Canada and a member of the task force for the Young BP Fellows. And it's great to see you all here for our fourth online speakers series event today. Leading our discussion today is fellow task force member Christy Jackaman from Mexico. Christy is a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, joined the Young BP Fellows in 2018 at the Mexico City event, and has been a crucial part of our efforts to develop more opportunities for you to engage with each other and with the foundation. Also joining us today from our group is Nicole Gooderson, Director of Engagement from the World Scout Foundation team, who has been a huge support to our task force, and will be happy to help answer any questions you might have about the foundation, the fellowship, or even our upcoming event in Ireland that we'll talk a little bit about today. We'll have some time for questions near the end of the hour, but if you have any thoughts or questions you think of throughout, please enter them into the chat, or just let me know that you're interested in asking a question so I know who to call on when we get to that point. Today's event is also being live streamed on our Facebook group, so welcome to those that are joining there, and feel free to also ask questions by just commenting on the video through Facebook, and I'll pick up on them and ask them on your behalf. So now, without any further delay, and to introduce our guest today, over to you, Christy. Welcome.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming today. We are joined by Chief Scout of Scouting Ireland, Jill Pitcher Farrell, the first female and youngest ever Chief Scout in 113 years. She's currently a master's research student in soil science after getting a bachelor's degree in environmental science, in line with her commitment towards promoting Scouts as stewards for the planet. From her position as Chief Scout, Jill has been able to promote youth empowerment and leadership, inspire adult volunteers, prioritize responsibility towards our planet, and promote adventure. With our next BP Fellowship event happening in Ireland in April of this year, we are really excited to have her with us today and look forward to hearing all about her background, motivations, accomplishments, experiences, lessons learned, and the Scouts of Ireland. Welcome, Jill, and thank you for joining us today.
Sorry, apologies. I thought I'd unmuted myself, but instead I turned the camera off. It's lovely to be here today and to see everyone. And hopefully, yeah, I can give you some more information and background about scouting in Ireland and some of my own kind of stories.
We look forward to that. So without further ado, you are such an accomplished young person. And after this intro, I would love to hear from you who you are. So please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I think Christy has given some information. So my name is Jill. I started scouting when I was 10. So I began in the Cub Scouts, and I was really involved in the local group through Scouts and Ventures. And then I became a Scout and a Venture section leader when I turned 18. And the local scouting has always been kind of the most important part to me and been where I've enjoyed it the most, I think. And I think it has like the huge impact. And then last year I decided to run for the position of Chief Scout. I'd had some experience at a national level and kind of running camps and being on different teams, but I really thought like it was important that we hadn't, in Scouting Ireland, we traditionally would have had kind of older Chief Scouts, and the position had changed slightly, and I thought it was a perfect opportunity for like a young person to go for it, and I really wanted to see that represented at a national level, because I think Scouting Ireland really strives for youth empowerment, but we don't often showcase it. And that's what kind of inspired me to go for the role. And that's how I ended up kind of going for it. And then there was huge support, and I had a lot of support from rovers and people around my age who I would have worked on camps and on teams, and even been on camps when I was 14 or 15 with. And I think that really motivated me. And they also inspired me to kind of keep going, and they've supported me a huge amount throughout the role as well. Then I suppose from another background, I studied environmental science as my undergraduate degree, and I'm currently doing research in soil science. And we're looking at a certain type of soil and increasing forestry in Ireland on this soil. And so that's been quite interesting. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go after that, but I'm enjoying it for now. And I enjoy the research, and I really like how it's outdoors basically, and it has to do with kind of the planet and protecting like our biodiversity and natural environments in Ireland. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
There are so many follow-up questions that I want to ask you. So I'm going to start by asking, how old were you when you ran for the position of Chief of Scout of Ireland, and how old are you now?
Yeah, so I am 23, and I was elected last May. So I was 23 when I was elected, but I suppose I was 22 when I started to run for it. So it was about this time last year where I had to kind of get nomination forms together, and I had to have a certain amount of nominations from our local scout groups and begin the campaign. And then, the election itself was in May of 2021, and I was 23 when I was elected.
Wow, that is amazing. So then you've been in scouting since you were 10, and now you're 23. So in the past 13 to 14 years that you've been a scout, how would you say scouting has helped you shape who you are today?
Yeah, so I think like scouting has hugely shaped me and shaped kind of my values. But I think one of the big things for me is like the soft skills that you learn from scouting, the leadership and the teamwork skills, particularly. I think more recently, since like working like in college and in different groups, outside of scouting, even in part-time jobs, I suddenly have realized there's a lot of people who actually just have no teamwork experience and no teamwork abilities. And it's not through a fault of their own. They've just never had that exposure. They've never had the opportunities to have to work together to complete a task, or even something as simple as going on camp as a small team, and you work out who's doing the cooking, who's doing the washing up, who's actually going to go get the water. And I think that is one of the biggest things for me, is the kind of teamwork skills that I've learned from scouting, whether that's through communication or also just learning when someone has a strong skill in an area and how to kind of help them develop other skills, or pick members of your team to do different tasks to make things work most efficiently. So I think that's been one of the biggest impacts, but also the leadership as well, I think is the really big thing for me, how to kind of take initiative and just work, like problem solve and work things out. And I think those are the real things that have impacted me and have helped me outside of that. And I see it in other people who are scouts. You see how they take it into other elements of their life. Whereas a lot of the things that other people may think of scouts, such as like your map reading and your knots, and they are all really useful skills, but they're not quite as transferable as our soft skills that we learn.
Yeah, and I think you are actually a living example of how scouting can empower youth. So I think that's very in line with what you just described. So besides scouting, and I think I know the answer to this, but I would love to hear it from you. Tell us what you're passionate about.
So I think like one of the big things I'm passionate about is definitely the outdoors. It's nature, it's protecting the planet. And I think it's not necessarily like, it's not all about protecting it, but it's actually just being outdoors. Like I love anything that's outside. I love hiking. I particularly enjoy kayaking as well as a as a sport, I do a lot of that in my free time. And I think that just being outside and appreciating nature is a huge thing for me, as well as trying to protect it and thinking about like how, you know, the impact we're having on it. I think just being outside is something I'm very passionate about. Yeah, it's like, it seems really like simple, but like that's probably my passion.
Yeah, I heard you're a kayak instructor, right? So how did you get involved with that? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I actually got involved in kayaking through scouting. So my local group is a Sea Scout group. So we would have done a little bit of kayaking regularly. And then I started to take it up outside of Scouts as well. And I became a flat water instructor through scouting and through the local kayak club. And then I joined the kayaking club in college, and I started to get more into some of the whitewater kayaking. And now I regularly would go whitewater kayaking, and I really enjoy that. I think there's so much adventure in it. And also you get to see places that other people will never have the opportunity to see. Like sometimes you're paddling down and there's not access to the river from, like walking down to it will be particularly difficult. Whereas you paddle down and you get to see things, or sometimes like there's like you might see like birds or different wildlife species like on the riverbank that if you'd walked up they might have noticed you, but because you were very quiet paddling up, they don't see you coming, which can be quite exciting.
And I love to hear with how much passion you speak about the planet and about how you love spending time outdoors. And I think we can tell because you also decided to make it your profession. You studied environmental science and now you're doing a master's in soil science. Do you want to tell us more about your research?
Yeah, so the research I'm doing is we're looking at a particular forest policy in Ireland, and we're looking at a particular type of soil that's underneath. We have a lot of peatlands in Ireland, so bogs, if anyone knows what they are. And there's a particular type of soil underneath some of them, which has like a high pH. So it's the opposite of being acidic, it's highly alkaline. And currently the forest policy suggests or basically bans forestry from being planted on these sites. And we're looking at some forests that have been planted previously before this forest policy came into play, and we're trying to see whether or not they've been successful. And we're looking at the different species that are on them and comparing kind of our native species to some of the imported species like Sitka spruce and Norway spruce. And we're seeing which species have been more successful and basically whether or not it seems viable to continue to plant forestry in these areas. So it's very interesting. Yeah, and I'm doing a lot of kind of soil chemistry, a lot of lab work, a lot of field work. And it's definitely been a really interesting experience to see how the research links up with our policy and how it can have the direct impact. And I think one of the things I really enjoyed is a lot of the landowners who they've converted areas of like their farm, say, to forests. And it's not necessarily the most economic choice, but they're passionate about it and they really want to see that this is having an impact. And sometimes you go into the forest and they're like, oh, it's not that viable to cut these trees down. They're not doing that well, but they'll be talking about the things they've seen in it, or talking about how their kids or their grandkids really enjoy playing in the forest and that's why they want to leave it there. And I think seeing that has made a big difference to me, or has impacted on me, because I think I often thought that some farmers and landowners, it's just about the profit, whereas it's really nice to see that there are lots of people out there who want to just have nice like forestry for the purpose of biodiversity and for climate, and just because it's a beautiful, like it can be a beautiful landscape basically. So that's been quite exciting as well. Yeah, and I'm hoping to finish up with the master's at the end of August. That's when I'll be submitting my thesis and hopefully writing a couple of presentations and papers, etc. And then I'm not sure quite where I'm going to go, but still in the area of science anyway. Yeah.
Well, then there's so many exciting things happening this year for you. It's fascinating to hear how such a young person can drive such a large impact, as you were commenting. So I would love to know, who is someone that you look up to and why?
Yeah, so I had to think about this question a good bit. And I think it's difficult because I think in different areas of my life, there's different people I would look up to. But I think one person in particular is probably Mary Robinson. So she was the first female president in Ireland, and she was also the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And she's very into kind of social justice, and she really looks at climate change, but from a climate justice point of view, and the impact that climate change can have on people and have on their lifestyles. And I think it's the way she portrays it is extremely emotive. It's not about, she's not talking about the soil or the trees or the animals. It's all about how people's entire lives are going to change, or entire lives could be ruined because of the impact of climate change. And I found her very inspiring, and just the fact that she broke so many barriers in Ireland. She was elected in the 90s, and at that point it was unheard of to have a female president, and we'd very few female people or females in power in Ireland. And she really kind of changed nearly how Irish society was thinking, and I just think she's extremely inspiring. And the fact that she's continuing now to do work even after all of that she's still really pushing climate and social justice and really standing up for everything she believes in, just hugely inspires me.
I love to hear that. My country has yet to see a female president, so hopefully in the coming years. So I would love to know if, how do you believe Scouting has changed in recent years, as you're talking about breaking barriers and how this inspirational woman has inspired you to kind of do the same. How do you feel that Scouting has evolved in the past years, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think one of the big things in recent years is obviously Scouting is a world movement, and it always has been a world movement, but I think we're far more connected now than we ever were before. And I think being able to stand together for certain issues and stand together for certain problems is really important. And I really hope that that we can continue to do that and really take that a step further into the future, be it for climate change or be it for any of the sustainable development goals, but to continue to really work together across borders and across nationalities, across everything. I think that's hugely important. I also think that Scouting has really begun, we always knew we were teaching people teamwork and leadership and things like that, but I think particularly in Ireland, that was never talked about or showcased in a way. It wasn't fully understood. Even a 17-year-old who'd been in Scouts for 10 years may not have been able to actually put words around that or explain that. And I think we've become a bit better at that, and I really hope in Ireland that we can do that, because I think we are empowering our young people, but sometimes we're not actually empowering them to discuss themselves and to empower themselves in a way where they can say, this is what I've learned, or I am able to do this. And I really hope that we'll be able to work on that. And I really think it's important that, now we are living in a very digitalized age. We're living in an era where smartphones and laptops and Zoom calls and all of that has become so much of a part of our lives during the pandemic. But I really hope that Scouting can stay outdoors and can move back to being as outdoors as possible post-pandemic. And I think it's really important that we are that space, because I think the space particularly for young people to be outside is really being diminished. And even when I think of when I grew up in Ireland, we used to play it's not that long ago, it's only 15 years ago, but we would have been out playing on the road and playing in fields and things until it got dark basically. But that's just not done anymore, and it's not considered necessarily safe, and a lot of parents would be very reluctant about it, but they're completely happy for their kids to go outdoors with the Scouts. And I think it's really important that we continue to provide that, because otherwise, if children aren't outdoors, they're never going to have that exposure to nature, and they're not going to develop that love of nature and want to protect it. And they're also not going to, they don't get that same social interactions if they are on screens, etc., all day long. So I really hope that we can still provide a space where it's away from the digital world. Going into the future. Obviously, we need to utilize the technologies in certain elements, but I think it's really important to remember our roots and being outdoors as well.
I love that you get to be the voice of the youth in those conversations, and I'm sure that that's a challenge. So in line with that, I would love to know, And I think everyone here would love to know, what is the greatest challenge that you have faced? And tell us the story.
I think thinking like along the line, like in this role, I think initially when I was elected as Chief Scout, we hadn't had a Chief Scout in Ireland for a number of years because of just in like internal issues and different things that were going on. So there was actually no one in the role, and the role had changed. So the role had changed, and then there was no one in the role. So when I first stepped into it, there was a lot of people didn't really know what to do with me or who I was supposed to be working with or what was going on. And that was definitely hugely a challenge. And I think I really thought, I was elected in May and I was like, yeah, I'll be well into it and I'll be able to like work on everything I want by September, no problem. And actually it's taken nearly till now to kind of get set up with certain teams and things. And that was definitely a challenge, but it wasn't something I couldn't work around. It just took a huge amount of kind of communication and teamwork and working with people to be like, okay, how would I like this role to, what do I want this to become? How do I want to portray the office of the Chief Scout now? And who am I going to work with? And that was a challenge for me, but it's gone quite well. And I'm still working away with it. And I think I just keep reminding myself that it's, you know, if I don't like achieve everything in the first year, it's a 3-year term, but that's okay. Once I get the kind of foundations laid, and even if I set a really good foundation for other young people to take on this role, I think that will be fantastic.
I would agree. So outside of the national office, which you've just shared, was a little bit confused at the beginning when you joined as national chief. How did the larger organization receive you when you took over the role?
The larger organization, I've had nothing but positive support. It's been absolutely amazing. I mean, obviously there's been 1 or 2 kind of queries around things, but generally everyone's been hugely enthusiastic. I think people really wanted to see young people at the face of Scouting Ireland. And I think people really wanted to see a change and just something like a breath of fresh air is what some people were saying. And I think as well, like a lot of the young people really relate to me when I'm going around and visiting groups. I can sit down and have a chat with the young people and it's no problem. I find it most of the time, I find that much easier than talking to the adult leaders. And I think then most adult leaders are delighted that I'm doing that. You know, they're just happy. They're like, oh, she's talking to the beavers and that's all they want. You know, they don't actually necessarily want to chat with me. And that's been really positive. And I think people have really, they've been really excited to see a female as well, because I mean, over half of our adult volunteers in Scouting Ireland are female, but they haven't been really represented before. So I think they were hugely excited. And a lot of our rovers, so kind of the 18 to 26-year-olds, like I've had a lot of people come up and be like, oh, since you're Chief Scout, I feel like I can run for county commissioner or run for group leader or other positions. And that inspires me to keep going as well. The fact that I'm inspiring others really encourages me. So yeah, huge positivity all around the island about it.
That's massive. That's a huge impact. So congratulations on that, and keep doing it and keep inspiring young people and young females to take over positions just like you did. I love to hear that. So in line with that, I would love to hear from you. What does it mean? Like, what does the role of Chief of Scouting mean to you?
Yeah, so I think like one of the big things that it means for me is that you're a role model and that you are there inspiring others and you're inspiring others to keep scouting. But I think it's also that, you know, I'm a really important kind of communicator. Like we have our board of directors, but they're not necessarily visiting groups. They're not in touch with scouting on the ground and scouting in local groups. And that's what I'm doing every weekend, or not quite every weekend, but nearly every weekend. I'm visiting a different local group and I'm chatting to them and I'm seeing how they're getting on and what the real problems for them are. And I'm also working closely with a lot of county commissioners and provincial commissioners to really link the local levels to our national levels and the national structures. And I think that's one of the big roles. And then also it's representing Scouting Ireland outside of scouting, because it's something we haven't been particularly good at. We haven't been particularly good at, being involved in a lot of the kind of conversations with our National Youth Council or the conversations with governments and local governments. And I think that's a big part for me, is actually showcasing that. And like, as I mentioned earlier, like my own personal journey and how I am an example of how scouting works and how youth empowerment and leadership can be developed through it. And I think representing that outside of it is really, really important. And I think that's one of the things I'm really hoping to work on this year.
I know that the pandemic has been a challenge for scouting everywhere, and it's made it harder to meet in person and to plan activities. So what's your approach to recover from COVID-19 in scouting membership numbers?
Yeah, so we've been quite, like in Scouting Ireland, we've been quite lucky. Our membership was just above 50,000 pre-pandemic, and we currently have 43,000. So we have had a loss, but it hasn't been, it hasn't been enormous. I think one of the big things that's really important is that we keep our adult volunteers inspired and involved. And I think we provide better supports for them, because I think a lot of them are really struggling to keep scouting, and a lot of them are finding it quite difficult. And we're seeing it with like local groups that some group leaders who thought, they were doing a 3-year term have now ended up kind of being snuck into doing 5-year terms, and they're getting demotivated. So I think it's really important that we support them through our provincial commissioners and through like training, etc. And that's what one of my big focuses. And then also I think it is about trying to keep different suggestions of program, etc. And supports out there in that sense. Like there's a lot of groups in Ireland who've been doing quite well with kind of different outdoor programs, and it's really basic, simple program. And I think reminding people that no matter what you're doing, even if you're not doing something extravagant, just going on a walk with your scouts, like that's hugely important. The fact that you're providing them an opportunity to talk to each other and spend time with each other and learn a lot of the behavioral and social skills again. I think reminding people that no matter what you're doing, what you're doing is enough. So that's really important for me. And just we're providing a lot of supports through our county commissioners and through our provincial commissioners in that sense. And then we're also trying hopefully to get a lot of our kind of national events and local events back up and running. I think we've just had an announcement yesterday about basically all the restrictions in Ireland are lifting now from today. So hopefully we'll be able to have bigger events in person. And I think that will really help, because I think they hugely encourage, particularly for a lot of the younger scouters. I think they really enjoy going to bigger events, or even if it's an event just with a couple of other groups, that can be hugely helpful. And it also can be easier than, say, trying to run a camp for yourself or for your own group. If you only have 8 scouts, it can be quite difficult. Whereas if you can go to something, that's a lot easier. And getting our kind of national scout sites back going, but they have been going the whole time. I think we've been lucky where a lot of stuff has kept going, just not to the full capacity, and that's definitely helped for Scouting Ireland.
In the topic of events in Ireland, I know that our next BP Fellowship event is happening in Dublin later this year. So, and I've heard some rumors about some of the activities that we have planned for the BP Fellows, and specifically the service project for the young BP Fellows. But I will let you talk about that.
Yeah, so what the service project that's being developed is on the Bull Island. The Bull Island is a nature reserve in Ireland. It's in Dublin, and it's right in the middle of Dublin Bay, and it's a really unusual spot in the sense it actually it's a sandbank that's gotten bigger and bigger over the years, and it has a huge amount of species and a huge variety of species that don't occur anywhere else in Ireland. And some of the species are at risk of extinction, etc. And it has millions of different, designations under the UN and the EU, and it's a UNESCO site. And one of the big threats to it is that there's a lot of invasive species that get brought onto the island through people or through the golf club or even through dogs that might eat a seed somewhere else and then they poo, and then that grows basically. So there's a lot of invasive species, and invasive species worldwide are actually the second biggest threat to biodiversity after habitat loss. So one of the events that the BP fellows or the young BP fellows will hopefully be helping with is removal of one of the invasive species, which is called sea buckthorn. And basically it's a really impressive species in the fact it can survive anywhere and it doesn't need very good soil. But as a result, it's outcompeting some of the native species on the island and some of the orchids and other things that don't occur anywhere else. So part of the event will be about removing that. But also, interestingly, this species that we will be removing can also be like made into kind of it's edible, the berries. So we might, I think there'll be an opportunity to like actually see how you can like utilize the berries and have that kind of foraging element brought into it, as well as the removal of the species, which will hopefully help the island, but then the utilization of it. So the kind of sustainability around that as well, that we're not just going to be removing it and burning it or getting rid of it, that we actually might be able to use some of the berries, etc. And even that opportunity, I think, to go to the island, like even apart from the fact that you're going to have the impact of helping to sustain it, it's an absolutely, like, it's a magnificent place. We have curlews, and then there's seals that live down the end of the island, and there's lots and lots of different birds. And then there's huge like diversity in the sense that there's like sand dunes and there's marshes, and there's just lots of different kind of areas within it. And I think the most magnificent thing is it's in Dublin Bay. It's right in the middle of our capital city, essentially. And I think that's one of the spectacular things about Ireland, is that because we're kind of a smaller country, but just in Dublin itself, there's so many like natural habitats that are just a pocket in the middle of the city. Like we have a huge big park called the Phoenix Park, and then we have Howth Head as well. And all along the coastline, like there's huge amounts of diversity and things. And I think it's nearly unique. Like there's been very few places I've visited where you see such like the urbanization right beside the kind of natural spaces. So I think that should be really interesting for everyone to experience. And even Larch Hill, where a lot of the or some of the accommodation is going to be like at night, you can see all the lights from the city, and you're really, really close, but you're also in a big campsite and you wouldn't notice how close you are to it. And you still feel like you're in the mountains, but you can see that the city's right there, which I think is very interesting.
I really look forward to attending this event and meeting you in person later in April of this year. And I love hearing you speak about Ireland and about how much you love your country. So I would love to hear what's your favorite thing about it.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about Ireland, which is something I mentioned earlier when we were just chatting, is actually how small it is. I mean, it's never in Ireland, like you're never more than kind of a 5 or maybe a 6 hour drive to the other side, basically. But for such a small country, I mean, we have huge amounts of boglands, we have mountains. I mean, a lot of people would probably consider them to be small mountains, but they're still mountains, they still count, and like spectacular cliffs and the sea. And I think that's probably why I like how small it is, because you're never too far from the sea or from a river or water body, which I quite like. And I think that's really nice. Like it's all quite close together and quite interconnected, which is lovely.
That's beautiful. I know you mentioned in an interview that you like to promote Scouts to be stewards for the planet. So why do you say Scouts should be stewards for the planet, and what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think so I do think, like, I really believe that Scouts should be stewards for the planet. And I think, to me, that like one of the big things is it's that educational piece and just that development of an appreciation of nature from a young age. So it's not necessarily that we're straight away teaching people that, you know, you have to fight for climate change or you must think about the planet in every step like in everything you do. Like, I don't think that's the really important thing. I think actually just educating young people about the world around them, I think that's like the big thing we can do, then the first thing we can do. And then it's just slowly bringing things in. Like, I think the principles of leave no trace is always something that even as a cub that we thought about, and how, you know, when you're walking and not to leave litter, and like those simple things that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily grow up learning. And I think that's really important. And then that can gradually get brought into more elements of your life, where you're starting to think, how does this impact the planet? Or how does my choice in what I'm purchasing or what I'm buying, how is this going to make a difference in the long term? And not necessarily always a difference to the planet, but then a difference to other people, etc. as well. But I think, I think the educational piece, where we're just actually bringing young people outdoors, and that we're actually exposing them to nature to give them that love and appreciation of it from a young age. I think that's really the key for me as to what Scouting can do.
And I know that this has been central to you, like throughout your Scouting journey. And as we start this new year, we're in January, what is top of mind as you set the priorities for this upcoming year in your organization?
Yeah, so I mean, well, my first thing is that, as I said, there was a little bit of some confusion. So I have a couple of teams that I'm getting set up straight away, but that will hopefully improve some communication lines within Scouting Ireland. So that's kind of my right now this week that I'm doing. But one of the other big things is youth empowerment. So I'm really working very closely with our national youth representatives in Scouting Ireland at the moment, and we're planning our National Youth Assembly and our National Youth Forum. And also we're hoping to set up a youth empowerment team, which will consist of a youth empowerment. It's not going to be a team in the sense it's not going to work necessarily on things, but we want to gather some young people who've been on other teams to see what the best practice is and how we can make it easier for younger people to be involved at a national level and at provincial levels. So that's definitely top of my priority list. And then also working around kind of a lot of the sustainable development goals and some of some of our work towards the planet. I will be helping with some of that development, and hopefully we had a sustainable Scouting from Home program last year, and we're hoping to kind of build on that and see how we can bring that further. So they're some of my goals for this year. But I've loads more, lots of other elements to that and lots of other kind of little things, but they're probably the top three. I think the other big thing for me as well is mental health and our mental well-being. So I think one of the big things we've noticed with a lot of young people coming back into Scouting is that they're really struggling with the kind of social side and the behavioural side, and we are seeing higher levels of anxiety in our young people. And I really want to make sure that our adult leaders are educated around that, and they know where to go for support for themselves, but also to find support for our young people. And particularly, I think for our venture sections, so kind of our 15, 16, 17-year-olds, to develop some workshops and things that will be tailored towards them. And we're hoping to bring them into our National Youth Assembly and the National Youth Forum, that there is a space for that. But that's really important. And I think it's really critical right now as we move into the post-pandemic world, that we are aware of that for our young people, and aware that, you know, people are taking on roles that they didn't have, and they're kind of moving back out and going back into being very busy. And that can be really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's crucial to speak about mental health. And like you said before, it is a breath of fresh air to hear it be a priority for the Scouting organization in Ireland. You mentioned youth empowerment. I would love to pick your brain, if you let me. Why is youth empowerment important, and why is it important for it to be a priority for every national Scouting organization in the world?
Yeah, so I think I think youth empowerment to me is how I feel I develop the most. I think when I was given opportunities to be empowered, and when I was given opportunities to just take the leadership on a task, even like when I was 13 or 14 or, you know, older than that, I feel that's where I was challenged the most, and that's where I learned the most from things. And I think that's probably why it's so important to me. And from discussing it with other people who I kind of grew up with, they would all say the same, that when they felt empowered, that's when they felt they learned the most. And I think it's a really difficult thing to define, because I think it's different for everyone. I mean, we've had workshops around it. I've had lots and lots of discussions around it. And I think you can't pinpoint exactly what you like. I don't think you can come up with a perfect definition, because in some circumstances I'll feel empowered by a small opportunity, and then in other circumstances I'll need a much bigger opportunity to feel fully empowered. And someone who's the same age as me could have the opposite. And then also I think it's about learning that, you know, everyone's on a different empowerment journey, and sometimes there's some days where you're able to empower yourself fully, and there's other days where you may not be. But I think it should be a priority for all of our scouting organizations. And I think providing spaces where young people can be involved, and young people can be involved in a way that suits them as an individual, but also as a young person. And I think one of the big problems is that a lot of the times with youth empowerment is we create, if we have a team or we have a position, we'll be like, okay, it's open to a young person, but then we'll bring them into the room, but the room is designed for adults, and it's designed in a very adult friendly manner, and it's actually very difficult for them to talk or them to portray their ideas because it's not suited to them. And that's really what I'd like to work on and kind of pick more young people's brains about, basically, is when have you felt most empowered, and like what made you feel empowered in that situation. And I think if we can learn that more and spread that best practice around, it will hopefully help more and more young people to feel empowered. And I think it's really important that it feeds down, because most of our young people are at local scout groups. They're not working at a national level, they're not working at a provincial level. So I think if we can develop ways to have youth empowerment being more prevalent in every single local scout group, and for every patrol leader or Cub Scout who's in charge of a small team, or everyone who's or every single young person, if they can feel empowered in their scouting journey, that's far more important than a few young people who are at a national level. But I think really we have to do both, and we have to, I mean, in my position, I think it's easier to start with the national, and then at least we can find some of the best practices that we can pull out and hopefully feed down. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your questions directly.
No, yes, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that before I joined the World Scout Foundation, I think the way in which I felt most inspired and empowered was through service projects, when I led service projects in my country. So I would love to hear if you could tell us about service projects that you've been involved in, or that you have felt proud of other scouts being involved in your organization. And after that, I would love to hear what service means to you.
Yeah, so I think, service, it can mean so many different things. And I think I always think of it as like service to kind of, I think about it into like you planet and people. And I think that's how I kind of think about it. I'm like, you're serving either someone else, or you're serving the world, like the planet, basically. And I think some of the service projects I've been involved in have been around, like on some of our national scout centers, where we've been developing, like, say, different like flood restrictions, or changing some of, like, for biodiversity, basically. We've done kind of some like tree planting, etc. But we've also done things where we've had to, so one of the big things in Ireland, this isn't actually on a national scout centre, but it was something I was involved in separately, is that we have peatlands, and peatlands are actually better at sequestering carbon per square metre than the rainforest, but only when they're healthy and vigorous. And one of the things is we've exploited a lot of the peatlands, and because when you're exploiting them, you drain them all, and you need to re-wet them. And something that you can do to do this is basically you just have to move move bits of trees back into the drains to stop the drains working, so that they re-wet the peatlands and they become like healthy again. So that was something that we worked on in a few small areas. But some other smaller service projects that I've also done, and we would have been involved in when we were younger, was we used to go carol singing in one of the local hospices. And it was a really, really simple thing, and we do a couple of weeks of practice beforehand, and then we just go and we were just singing. And I'm an absolutely awful singer, but I used to always go, and it was really nice. And it was just that it was, you'd meet a lot of people who, like, they didn't necessarily have visitors coming into them, but they'd come up and they'd like have a little chat, they'd have a chat with you, and they'd be absolutely delighted to just hear young people and hear them singing. And I think that like those smaller things. I think a lot of the time we think of service projects as being absolutely like huge impacts, but I think actually those smaller impacts are really important to remember as well. And one of the other local scout groups is also quite involved with the Special Olympics. And they run a lot of, they do like refereeing essentially for some of the matches. Just kind of once a month, some of the scouts volunteer, and it's bocce, I think is what it's called, and they like hold flags up, and it's really simple, but they're involved with the youth games. So rather than it being adults doing it, it's some of the young people. And then it's really nice for the young people who are participating in the games to actually kind of have a chat then with the scouts who are refereeing the matches. And I think that's really nice, and that exposure to people who are different to yourself and people from a completely different background. And I think that those kind of smaller projects are really important to remember as well when we think about our service projects. Yeah.
I feel like I could talk to you all day, Jill. But with that, I will end my questions for you. It's been delightful to hear you share about what inspires you and about all the things that you have planned for the organization in Ireland. You're truly a fascinating young woman, and I'm really excited to see you continue to inspire youth. So now I would like to open the floor for questions, both live and submitted previously. So thank you very much, Jill, and over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks so much, Jill. What a great conversation. It's been a really excellent opportunity to learn about scouting in Ireland, about your story, Jill, leading into the role you have with the organization. And like Christy said, now is the part of today's meeting where the young VP fellows have the chance to ask some follow-up questions. So please either raise your hand through the Zoom meeting or indicate you'd like to do so through the chat. I'll maybe just get things started myself with a question of my own. I know you touched a little bit on Larch Hill, which is, I think, figures prominently in our upcoming event. I'd just love to hear a little bit more about the camp, and if you have any idea of the kinds of things we'll be doing there, and maybe some of your own stories of camps that you've attended there, and what your favorite part of the site is.
So Larch Hill is our national campsite. It's the biggest one. It's only just outside Dublin, is what as I was saying, and I think it's absolutely spectacular. And 100% when you're up there, if there is a clear night, you should walk up to the top of the Cub Field, is what it's called, and you can see the lights of the city. And I think that's the nicest part. And I know it's kind of strange because I'm saying all about how I love nature, and I'm now being like, oh yeah, but you can see this like urban area. But sometimes if you get a really nice night, you can see like the stars perfectly in the sky, say behind you and above you, and then you can see all of the city. And I think that contrast is absolutely spectacular. So it's right at the kind of foot of the Dublin Mountains. So you can go like hiking from it as well, and you can hike all through kind of the Dublin Mountains into the Wicklow Mountains and onto like along the Wicklow Way, etc. And that'd be one of the big programs. But there's also a lot of there's a good bit of forestry up there, so backwoods cooking or kind of hammocking and building shelters, etc. would be a lot of the program that you might be participating in. There is a small kind of zipline course on the site, and there's also like a huge big zipline course, or well, not huge in comparison to some of the ones around the world, but one of the biggest in Ireland anyway, is like it's about a half an hour kind of walk away across some of the field or across other fields and that's close by as well. I always would have we have like our county competitions, so the campcraft challenges would have been held up in Larch Hill, and they're definitely some of my kind of favorite experiences, because you're 14 or 15 and you're like, I was in charge of like my patrol of 7 other scouts, and we would have been like not left entirely on our own, but you've no leaders on your site for the weekend, and you're pitching your tent and then building building your gateways and building your dresser, etc., and then cooking for yourselves. And they are probably some of my favorite experiences. And I distinctly remember it was our first, I think we'd had one, and our county wasn't particularly like advanced in the sense of we hadn't gotten too serious about it. We weren't very competitive, and we decided we were going to join the other county. Well, I didn't decide, but we were on it with the other county, and they had one side of the field and their sites were spectacular. They were absolutely, they had huge big gateways, and so many things built. And our sites were over here, and we pitched kind of 5 on one side and 5 on the other, and we had this like lovely big area in the middle, and the leaders came down and they were like, how come no one's built any gateways? And it was just because we were all just playing tag rugby right through the middle of the sites in the like thoroughfare. We just had given up on pitching our tents. Like, we pitched our tents, it was enough, we could sleep when we'd had dinner, and that was fine. But we decided it was time to just play bulldog takedown and to play tag rugby. And I think that's one of my favorite memories from being in Larch Hill, because I got to know so many people from it. And there's a lot of the people who I particularly remember playing that game, who are still local leaders in a lot of the groups near me. And I think that's just really inspiring to see how people have kind of kept up through that, and how you build connections on a camp like that, which is nearly 10 years ago now. And they would have been a lot of the people who then supported me through running for Chief Scout, and I've met since, and they've supported me, which I think is really nice. But yeah, the campsite itself is absolutely is really nice. Like, there's loads of different fields, and I think it's like there's a lot of small fields. Kind of, you have like a little bit of forestry, and then there's one of the camping fields, and then another bit of forestry, or a place where you can do activities, and then more camping, which is really
excellent.
nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you described there, we're all familiar with from our own campsites near where we grew up. So that's really great to hear. I think it's a common thread through scouting. And thank you, Jill. Luis, I think everyone should now be able to unmute, and you had indicated you had a question, so feel free to jump in and ask Jill your question.
Sure. Hi, Jill. I'm Luis Feliciano from New York. In my role in scouting here in New York, I have a big responsibility trying to recruit scouting leaders, and we always have a challenge of recruiting younger leaders. I know that you said one of your priorities is attracting younger scouters to Scouting Ireland. So what are your first steps, how you're starting to tackle that?
Yeah, so I think, like, for me, and from kind of my experience, I think one of the big things for young leaders is that they need to feel that see how either kind of they're benefiting it from a development point of view, or how they're going to benefit from it in terms of like adventure. And I think that's how I'm starting to kind of promote it, is actually that, like, going, if you have had limited exposure to scouting, that the adventure you can have from it is huge. I think recently, like, I've joined like club, or not recently, but over the past couple of years in college, I've been involved in kind of the kayaking clubs and outdoor pursuits clubs. And I'm talking to people and they'll be like, oh, how come, where did you learn this? And I'm like, oh, from Scouts. And I think promoting that to people, that those adventures for a lot of kind of 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds, like, that's huge. The fact that you could go away and just spend it camping and spend it hiking or kayaking and be exposed to things that you've never done before. I think promoting that really helps to pull young leaders in. And then also the skills development. I think really tying in the fact that, from being a scout leader, you will learn teamwork and leadership skills, and learn skills for life, and be provided with kind of training and things. I think that's something we're really trying to help develop. Is some of we have quite a strong leader training scheme in Ireland, but I think we are going to be reviewing it and seeing how that can be better pitched for some of our younger leaders. And I think that's different because, if you come into scouting as a parent, it's very different to coming into scouting as a young, as either someone with a scouting background or just as a young person. And I think the training needs to be slightly different. And we're currently kind of discussing that and working around that with Scouting Ireland, but I'm not sure if that's something that would be worth kind of thinking about, whether or not there can be something more specific for your young leaders when they come in, or something specific to help their kind of development or encourage them further.
No, I think that's great. That's a great way of thinking of it. Also, I have another question. This one is a little bit maybe more fun. About have you guys thought about fundraising with NFTs?
With fundraising with
NFTs, selling NFTs to fundraise.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I know what NFTs are. It's like
it's like the digital arts that they're selling online with Ethereum and
Okay, no, I haven't thought about it at all. I was like, that's probably quite clear. I have no idea what an NFT is, but yeah. It could be a good opportunity though. I'll definitely have to look into it now. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Louise, for the question. Thanks, Jill. Another question I had, you talked a little bit about your university program in environmental science and with your research in soil. Did scouting sort of lead you into that educational path? Was that always what you had in mind? And then I know you said you're not quite sure where that's taking you, but what thoughts have you had so far about, the kind of career that you'd like to end up in as a result?
Yeah, so I think scouting didn't directly, but I think always from being in scouts, I had a kind of love for the environment. And I actually went into college doing general science. So it was like everything, it was chemistry, physics, biology. And I wasn't sure. It wasn't until I was 2 years into it that I was like, okay, no. I was originally thinking of doing a degree in chemistry. And then I was like, no, I'm way more passionate about the biology side of it and the environmental side of it. And I kind of realized, I started to put 2 and 2 together and realized that from my scouting background, that was what I was passionate about. So why not try and kind of bring that into my career? And I think long term, I'd really like to move into kind of the environmental education space. And I think I'd love to see environmental education, outdoor education, but not in the sense of how I think we think of outdoor education as being kayaking, as being hiking, but I really mean education in the outdoors. When I say it, that's what I'm thinking about. And I'd really like to see that being brought more into primary schools and into some of our, into our actual, our formal education scheme, because I think it is really important going forward. And that's where I'd like to move in, that's long-term where I'd like to end up. Not exactly sure how to get there, and I'm not sure that space is even quite there yet, but that's kind of my vision.
That's great. And I know scouting in many countries is something that is tightly tied to the schooling system, and scouting, I think, it matches perfectly what you described there in terms of an outdoor education. It's always been the way I've thought of scouting is, you learn through experience and you're in the outdoors, and maybe you can sort of merge the role you've had with the scouting organization with education. Anyone else that would like to ask a question for Jill? And thank you, Jill, for the answer there. Just raise your hand through Zoom or post a question in the chat. If not, then we'll maybe just move on to a few final notes here. Just give everyone a quick opportunity, and let me just check Facebook, see if anyone there has asked a question as well. No, I think we'll move on. So thanks very much, Jill, and thanks again, Christy. Oh, sorry, I just saw Leo raise your hand there in the chat. Leo, feel free to unmute, come on camera, and we'll ask your question here. I don't think I can spotlight you. There we go.
Yeah,
perfect. Okay.
Got me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch it. If you're going to be going to World Scout Jamboree in Korea, do you have any plans to go there?
Yeah, no, I definitely do plan to go there. I'm not sure in what capacity yet. So Scouting Ireland, we were a little bit delayed, but we have registered our contingent now, and we're just sorting it. We're just sorting out basically everything, I think. So we're just appointing our head of contingent currently. So I'm not sure what capacity I will be in Korea, but I do plan to be there. I'm not sure whether it will be as part of our contingent team or whether I'll just be there as the chief scout, basically. So
follow-up question. Would you like to trade your Jamboree scarf and badge with me, setting up this trade right now?
I could definitely consider it. Yeah. Where are you from, Leo? Sorry.
I am from Mexico. I am based in the Netherlands. And I think I'm one of the eldest young BP fellows.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, no, I definitely if I meet you at the Jamboree, I definitely would be able to. I'm not sure what our badges or anything will look like. I assume the scarves will be very similar to the ones we've had for the past couple of years and to the current international neckerchief. But they'll probably have a different design on the back, but I'd say they will look very similar to this.
No, definitely. I think the act of swapping, scarf or badges is not just about exchanging, a token, but actually having a chance to build a friendship. So that's the whole purpose, I believe.
No, I think you're right. I think it really is. It's much more than just like the the item itself. It is about having the conversation and learning about someone else and having that discussion. And I think that's hugely powerful.
We'll meet in Korea then.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks, Leo. Thanks, Jill. And thanks again, Christy. What a great conversation. It's been a great opportunity to learn more about Scouting Ireland, about your incredible story, Jill, and your role with the organization, and to start thinking about the upcoming event that we all have in April. Thanks everyone for logging in today, and Christy for leading us, and for all of you that joined us. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. You'll keep an eye out for the next speaker series that we organize. Just a final few things. We hope that these kinds of experiences that we organize has inspired you to remain involved with the Young BP Fellows, with the foundation, with Scouting in general. And if it's inspired you to give back, whether it's a pledge to your full fellowship donation to support a specific project like Ticket to Life, or to make a one-time donation, you can learn more on our website at worldscoutfoundation.org, or you can reach out to us directly on Facebook as well, that you're all in the Facebook group. And finally, the one thing we do want to make sure we mention today too is that we do have our event coming up in April in Dublin. So please keep tuned to your email inboxes. I'm sure we'll also promote it in the Facebook group once that information is out. It should be out very shortly. So just keep an eye out for that, and we'll all look forward to seeing each other face to face after quite a long time in Dublin, and we'll have the opportunity to meet Jill face to face and enjoy all the things that we've talked about today at Larch Hill, the community service project, and the event that we all have come to love over the years in different parts of the world. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks, Jill. We're immensely grateful for the time you spent with us today, and the time you took to learn about the Young BP Fellows. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll all see you next time. Thanks again. Take care.
Bye-bye. Lovely to
Bye.
meet everyone.